So welcome to our panel discussion on demystifying graduate school. So this is the first of our programs that we're offering from our Title 5B Faculty Fellows this year. So the Title 5B Faculty Fellows, I'll just introduce that program very briefly. So this is part of our Title 5B campus program on STEM graduate excellence. The faculty fellows that are speaking represent some of the most experienced graduate mentors that we have in the sciences on our campus, and they're very excited to speak to current and prospective graduate students. The group of faculty that are speaking this morning have collectively advised more than 100 graduate students who have successfully graduated from their graduate programs, including mentoring more than 21 theses to completion and 92 students that completed other culminating experiences. As a group, the group of faculty mentors that are speaking this morning have published more than 170 peer-reviewed publications, and several have been highly successful in getting external grant funds that support scholarship activities and student researchers here at CSUB. One of the key groups of this faculty fellows group is to support student success, especially student success in the sciences in STEM at CSUB, and to develop programs like this one that will aid students as they enter, carry out, and complete their graduate education. Today's program is the first of 4 programs that we're going to be offering this year. The next program will be on Wednesday, December 2nd, also at 8 a.m. And that's going to be a workshop, so a little more interactive on developing skills for graduate student success, things like time management, developing an understanding with your mentor about kind of expectations that you have of them and expectations that they have of you. So some skills that can help you succeed. And I'll remind everyone of that date again at the end of today's panel. We understand that the decision to apply to graduate school can be exciting and it can also be daunting. And understanding what graduate programs look like for an applicant, understanding what graduate school will be like once you're a student, understanding how graduate programs might help you meet your professional and career objectives. All of those things can assist students in making the decision to attend graduate school and succeeding once they're in graduate school. So this morning's topics are all things that address those issues. So several faculty are going to speak briefly this morning about some topics that are important to understand about graduate school. So I'll introduce each panelist and their topic and then let them go ahead and speak. Our first speaker this morning is Dr. Brandon Pratt, who's a faculty member from the Department of Biology. Dr. Pratt is going to be speaking this morning on deciding to attend graduate school, weighing between career goals, benefits, timing, and costs. So Dr. Pratt.
Thinking about graduate school and whether or not to go, the first thing I'll say is that virtually anyone can go to graduate school, okay? You don't have to be a straight A student. You need to have interest in learning and some basic skills and motivation, but it's not very common. I haven't seen a case where a student just wanted to go, but couldn't because they lack some skills. So virtually anyone can go. So the upsides of going to graduate school. So the question is, should you go? And so the upside, there's many upsides to graduate school. It's exciting at times, it's rewarding at times, it's informative, you're learning a lot, you gain important skills for your future career. If you have a graduate degree, it usually sets you up for a position where you can have a leadership role more often. If that sounds appealing, it makes you more competitive on the job market for certain jobs. You're typically going to make more money, and you make connections along the way that can be important for your career. Some of the downsides, it can be very difficult. It's not easy. It's costly. It can be lonely and scary. Okay, so some significant downsides. So when thinking about the question, should you go to graduate school? The answer is yes, if you need to. So how do you know if you need to go to graduate school? Well, that said, if you need to, that's one way to think about it. But if, like many students, you don't know what to do with your life, but you enjoy school and learning, and are excited about the idea of deeply studying a topic, contributing to knowledge, graduate school might be a good option for you. So if you're still exploring what to do with your life, but you know you're interested in those things, you might consider graduate school. Kind of a simple question to ask if you need to go. It's pretty easy. What are your career goals? And if to meet these career goals, you need a graduate degree, then your answer is very straightforward. Yes, you must go to graduate school. If the answer is no, I don't need a graduate degree to meet my career goals, then you should not go. Okay, the downsides outweigh the upsides in that case. Okay, timing of graduate school. When is the best time to go to graduate school? Many students go straight from undergrad to graduate school, but many students go later in life once they figure out more what their career goals are and they realize they need that graduate degree to go. So there's really no best time to go. If you know you need to go, then go sooner rather than later. The last thing I'll just mention here briefly is costs. Okay, tuition can be costly. We have financial aid advisors on campus that can work through this with you. Some grad schools have tuition waivers. By the way, ours doesn't for in-state students. This is something we've tried to obtain, and for various reasons, we haven't been able to do that. But if you look beyond CSUB, other graduate schools may have tuition waivers. So think about that. Grant and scholarship funding is important. If you have an advisor, your advisor can help with that. The director of whatever graduate program you're targeting can help with that. The Graduate Student Center here at CSUB has an excellent website with a pretty comprehensive list of sources. Okay. And then the last cost I'll mention is time. If you're spending time as a graduate student, in many cases, it's not realistic to work full-time for the entire duration of your graduate studies. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later. And if you're working less, that equals less money. And so that is another cost that you need to consider. And so that does it for what I wanted to say. And I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Great, thank you, Dr. Pratt. Our next speaker is Professor Annie Huynh from the Department of Nursing. And Professor Huynh is going to be speaking to us about setting priorities first prior to applying, balancing work, family, and financial obligations with school and program requirements. Professor Huynh?
I am a nurse practitioner. So I started with my nursing degree from Bakersfield College, and then went to CSUB to get my bachelor, and then moving on into my master immediately after my bachelor, because I was on the path to complete or trying to get my degree for my job. So before you applying for grad school, you need to know, what do you want to do? So I echo what Dr. Pratt was saying, that you need to set some goals and why you truly want to go. But even before that, I have to step back and think, well, I had a full-time job as a nurse. So you need to know, if you have a full-time job, if you have kids, if you have parents that you have to take care of, if you have, family duties, church duties, friends, you have also volunteer activities, or you have other things that you set yourself as a goal. For example, exercise or hiking. You have to put those priorities into it before you make decision in applying grad school, because it's going to compromise all the activities that you're doing, whether it's work or you're hiking or your, game night with your friends, things like that will affect your social surrounding, affecting also your school. So before you're applying, you need to think about those activities and what you can take off in order to fully get yourself in gear to apply for school and then stay in school. So for me, I asked myself, why do I want a higher degree? At the time that I was making the decision, I feel that I need more skills in my nursing career to become a nurse educator for the operating room. So it was at the right time that I needed to start going for a higher degree in order to get more improvement for the organization that I work for, which is Bakersfield Memorial Hospital at the time. So the goal, I was like, okay, so I have a goal. And then next I was thinking, well, I have 2 young kids and I have, my husband. And then I also have my mom who had Alzheimer's. And so I had to put those into the factor to make decision how much it's going to affect me. And I have to make conversation with my sister to help if there are things that I'm going to go to school. So you're going to help me with mom. And those are the conversations that I have to have before I even apply in school to make a good decision that is going to, not affecting too much about what's surrounding me. So second, there's another thing that I really suggest all of you do, is I do this with my undergraduate student right now, is that anytime you make any decision, I always get a piece of paper out, and then I'm going to draw a line in the middle. One side is a pro and the other side is a con. So Dr. Pratt mentioned there's finance issue. There is also school length issues, and then also where to go. So I always list down what are the top priorities and what are the pros and the cons. So before you apply, you need to know what your finance situation is, how much you're going to have reserved, if you have a mortgage of your home, if you have a car payment still going on, because there's certain degree that require different equipment that you will need to buy, or the book cost is going to be coming up, and the length of school time. For me back then, from a associate degree to a bachelor was only about a year. So it wasn't bad. But then before I applied to master degree, that was a 2-year program, and it 1 year become 3 year in a row. So it was a little bit, it wasn't shock, but at least it was affecting me personally, my finance and my family. And then also, what kind of program you want to go, what route you're gonna go. For nursing, I can talk about it. In nursing alone, in the graduate school, we had health management, we had nurse practitioner, we had school nurse credential, we have health information system. We had different route that a nurse can get higher degree. And again, you have to make decision, what is your goal you want to accomplish. Unfortunately, I made my goal. I made my goal to become a clinical nurse specialist at that time, because I was a nurse educator for the operating room. I want to get more skills, right? But unfortunately, that was in 2008, the recession time, and CSUB didn't have enough students, so they closed the program. And my advisor was giving me a choice. You either can become a school nurse or a nurse practitioner, because we don't have that clinical nurse leader option anymore. So I was like devastated. They told me I can go to LA or the McGill Hill to go to school there. So even though I applied school, I want my goal there, but it didn't happen the way I want it to be. And because of my 2 kids, I cannot go out of town to attend school. At that time, we don't have all these online stuff yet. So I obligated to go ahead and just finish my degree in nurse practitioner, and lo and behold, I love it. I am a nurse practitioner now. I'm really happy that, God actually paved the road for me for some reason, accidentally away from the goal I made, but it opened up doors for me down the road. So even though you can make decisions and all these things, sometimes things happen. So just keep in mind, your applying school will affect your family, your health. You're gonna need to stay healthy for your own family, and then also finance, and also the length of time. So those are the things that to keep in mind before you apply for grad school.
Great, thank you very much, Professor Huynh. Our next speaker is Dr. Krugh. Dr. Krugh is in the Department of Geological Sciences, and he's going to speak to everyone just briefly about how to apply to graduate school, specifically sending inquiry emails and finding the right advisor.
So you've decided to apply to graduate school, you've weighed your options and decided you want to go. And so how do you go about finding the right program for you? What are your interests in? So in doing this, some of the things that you want to think about are deciding what type of program you're interested in. There's often very different types of programs, and there can be thesis programs, non-thesis programs where you do projects or take classes. It can be certificate programs as well as credential programs that may be required for the type of career that you're interested in, what your goals are. So you have to weigh what your career interests are, what your interests in the field may be, what type of research you might be interested in, but also your family and work commitments, because the topics that you might be most interested in may not be locally. You may have to look farther afield to see programs that deal with your interests and your career goals. So you have to keep that in mind and balance out these different issues. One good resource that you can do is when you have some idea of what your goals are, is to talk to an advisor or to your current faculty members that you may be working with and have similar interests to you. Go talk to them because they know people that are working in the field, and they can make recommendations on maybe you should go and look at this person at this school in their research group, or this program is really well known for the nursing students to go get their degree. So it's something that I highly recommend you do this early in advance, ideally several months in advance. As soon as you thinking about going to graduate school, you should start researching these as soon as you can. It may not always be the case, but that's where a faculty member can sort of help you streamline and speed up that process. When you do kind of start thinking about your goals and what type of program you might be interested in or what type of research you might be interested in doing, it's good to, and you've got a couple of schools or advisors lined up, it's good to start doing some research on them, to actually go and see what type of work they're most recently doing. This can be through the group research websites that they have. It can be through looking at Google Scholar for recent publications or presentations that they may have done at national or regional society meetings. You see those online. Seeing what their group is actively involved in can be really useful. And again, this is another place where a faculty advisor can help you sort of guide you on finding some information about that and maybe provide you with some sources. And when you have that narrowed down to slightly narrowed down, you don't want to focus on one particular faculty member or program. You may want to spread your net a little bit wider than that and apply to several locations. But you can start thinking about sending out an email inquiring whether they have potential research opportunities coming up, what type of things are required to get into the program. So you can talk to a graduate program director to see what those requirements might be. But if you're going the research route, you may be talking to an individual faculty member in a department. And so crafting a introduction email to ask about opportunities is really important. You want to keep in mind that everyone's really busy. You want to keep the email short and very professional. So some of the things that you can do is focus on your research interests, what your interests are. Why are you motivated? What are your motivations to pursuing a graduate degree? You want to highlight some of the skills that you have that might help their research group, but also skills that you're interested in learning and topics that you might be interested in sort of developing your skills in. You can ask if they have any upcoming opportunities, if they're accepting students. This may not be the best time to ask for funding. Ask about funding if they have funding opportunities, but it's anticipated most faculty members will answer those types of questions. If you are going to be, if it's a local faculty or a school program, you could potentially go and visit. If it's not, you may be going to a conference to attend a major conference potentially. You let them know about that because they may be there, and that may be an opportunity to, one, go see some of the work that they're actually doing, but actually meet them and talk to them in person and introduce yourself. Be patient. As I mentioned, faculty can be really busy. So if you don't hear from them within, I'd say, a week, you might send a follow-up email. And if maybe one more email after that in another week or so. If there's no response, you may have to take them off of your list and move on to someone else on lower down on your list. So once you've done that and you've started a conversation with those faculty members, that's really important because they're going to be the ones trying to lobby for you to be accepted into the program and to lobby for any available funding. But one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure you don't miss any of the deadlines. There's often two deadlines. You may find that there's priority deadlines, which are if you're interested in receiving any funding, if there's research opportunities, TA opportunities, teaching assistantship opportunities. These are all things that often have a priority deadline. And then there's often a later sort of general admission deadline for ones where you may not be interacting with directly as closely with a specific faculty member. So you want to check ahead of time what the application requirements are, what the admission requirements are for a program, because this often may or may not involve standardized tests like the GRE. You want to make sure that you have those completed far enough in advance that you may even want to take them a couple of times. So you want to be doing that far enough in advance. And you also want to put some time and thought into crafting a statement of purpose. Most applications will require you to have some sort of statement of what your motivations are, what your goals are, and why you're interested in their specific program. So you want to keep that as professional as you can. I recommend running that by a faculty member in your department to see what they think, and they can give you some tips and pointers on crafting that. And finally, don't wait to the last minute to apply. There can be a lot of things you have to pull together. And so don't wait to the last minute, get that application together and send it off ahead of time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Krugh. So our next speaker is Dr. Amber Stokes, and she's going to be speaking about understanding graduate school time commitments and planning. What is the normal time commitment for full-time and part-time graduate students in the sciences? Dr. Stokes?
I'm going to talk about what happens in terms of your time commitments once you're actually in graduate school. So for most of our programs, you'll have a lot of different things that you're trying to balance all at the same time that are a bit different than what you see now as an undergraduate. And so you, of course, have some courses and coursework, though that tends to be kind of a lesser commitment in terms of numbers of courses that you're taking at a given time as a graduate student than as an undergraduate. But in addition to all of that, then you have a lot of reading. You want to read papers relevant to your topic of study because you're trying to master your particular area, right? So you need to be doing a lot of reading in the literature. You also may need to get IRB or IACUC approval, and this will depend on your particular lab. I usually just deal with the IACUC for most of my students who are doing stuff similar to what I do, but sometimes we have to have students actually submit their own IRB or IACUC approval. You'll be doing some actual lab or field work, so collecting data, right? And once you collect those data, you need to have a good mechanism of organizing those data and keeping track of what you did, because I think while you're doing experiments, you always think, yes, I'll remember everything I did, but you will forget. Believe me, you will. And so you need to have a good lab notebook and a good way of keeping track of all of the things that you're working on. Once you collect those data, then you have to start with some data analysis. So you're going to need to determine whether or not you actually see an effect from whatever your treatment or research question was in particular, and then kind of start interpreting those results. There's a lot of writing involved. So you're going to be writing a proposal for your thesis that will then be approved, hopefully, by your committee. You may need to write proposals for grants or for even write scholarship applications, those types of things. Hopefully you get to publish your work, so you'll need to write to get these things published. You of course need to write your thesis, but you may have additional things. So you may go to a scientific conference and need to prepare a poster, or maybe you've decided to do an actual talk, so you have to prepare all these things. And then at the end, there's a culminating experience. If you're going into the nursing program, and I got some help with this from Professor He, thank you very much. But if you're going into the nursing program, there's you have kind of all of those things, but you also have patient care hours that you have to complete, as well as tracking and documentation of all of your patient encounters, tracking your clinical hours, etc. So you have some additional things to all of these other things that you have to do. And then all of these programs have some sort of culminating experience. So you have to, you know, do a thesis defense where you give a presentation and then get grilled by your committee. No, they ask you questions, but it's not that bad. So you're going to be spending a good amount of time trying to balance all of these different tasks. And it can be a little bit challenging. You have to figure out how to prioritize the various tasks and how to kind of break them down into small components so that you can work on them over time. And then of course, we all have things that we need to do in our personal lives. So we all have, you know, commitments to our family. You may have to work in addition to going to school. You have, you know, doctor's appointments, whatever. You have all these extra things that you have to do, and hopefully you find time for fun as well. And so the time commitment can be rather large, but the other thing that's important to note is that the time commitment and the things that you work on are largely independent. And so your advisor is probably not going to be telling you, okay, now read this paper, now read this paper, now do this in the lab. You want to try to get to a point where you're doing all of those things kind of on your own and figuring it out independently. That's not to say that we won't help you. Of course, we're here to help you, but we're not going to tell you every single step of what to do. And so being self-motivated is really important when you're in graduate school, and again, learning to kind of prioritize all of your different time commitments and kind of focus on those end goals like Professor Huynh was talking about. So this is kind of what you can expect from your graduate program, and they all vary slightly depending on what you're doing. But yeah, that's kind of what you should expect from studying at the graduate level.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. Stokes. Continuing on the same theme here of things to expect once you're already in a graduate program, our next speaker is Dr. Antje Lauer. Dr. Lauer is in the Department of Biology, and she's going to be speaking about the expectations of graduate students, the process of becoming an independent researcher and scholar. Dr. Lauer?
So good morning, everybody. So some of you might know me, but those who don't, you know, quickly, I'm teaching microbiology in the Department of Biology for 12 years. I had a bunch of graduate students. I always have undergraduate students, and many of those undergraduate students that I actually have in my lab, they become my graduate students. That's one of the first things that I want to talk about. But about me personally, I obtained my undergraduate and graduate degree in Germany. I also did my PhD in Germany, and then I did a couple of research positions in the United States on the East Coast, Virginia and North Carolina, and then I became a professor in Bakersfield. So what do I think is important here for you? And a lot of things that are important for a successful and independent graduate students were already mentioned. So what has not been mentioned? So from my experience, I can say that first of all, you need to like your project. So when you decide for a master's program and you decide for a thesis track, which you can do in the biology department and in the Department of Geological Sciences, or you decide for maybe a smaller project during the non-thesis track, which you can do in lots of other graduate programs, you need to like it. And we actually allow students to come up with their own project. So if you have a great idea, just discuss this with a potential mentor, and they will probably love that when students come with their own idea. Yeah, so if you develop your own idea, so that will kind of help you also to stay on top of it. So you will be very much motivated to continue. Yeah. So also when you are very motivated, you will probably be able to finish it on time. So theoretically, you have time to finish your project in, let's say, 5 years, but you don't want to work 5 years on your master's program. You can even extend it to 7 years. You don't want that. You could do a PhD thesis during that time. Now, if you want to be successful, you have to have a time plan that you can do the, let's say, data analysis in 1 year, and then you do some writing, and you're definitely done before the second year is over. Yeah, and even have maybe a good publication out of it, which opens the door for a PhD, yeah, or for the job market. You're very competitive then. Yeah, so this is important. Okay, so when you like your project and you get started, and I mentioned at the beginning that a lot of the students actually start as undergraduate students before they become graduate students, you start developing a relationship with a mentor. And that mentor, of course, observes you, observes how you work. Yeah, and when you work good, they will like to take you in as a graduate student. If you do poor, they don't. It's as easy as that. So you have to show that you can produce data that is reliable, that you're good, and also that you are able to troubleshoot when maybe your data analysis is not working that great and you have to figure out what's maybe wrong with the method. Now, when you have discussions with your mentor, the mentor is looking for that you understand what you're talking about, that you understand how that spectrophotometer works or whatever else you're using, that you have an understanding. So only then can you troubleshoot your method. And remember, the master's program is named a master's program. So you're expected to master something. Yeah. So we already mentioned that you can ask for help from your mentor, but your mentor also wants to see that you have thought about it. Only then can you be independent and successful. Yeah. And then also we often have students that are successful at the beginning, but then kind of never really finish. Yeah. And there are sometimes reasons involved, like you find a good job. You have found a job because your employer saw you are a successful student in the graduate program and offers you a good job. And you're kind of lured in because it's a good salary. And I would be very careful of this because I have examples of students who they never finish. Yeah, and even though this job that you get offered is very inviting and great at the point because you need money, it stops you from finishing this very important thesis, which opens the world for you. Yeah, so don't do that. Be careful about that. Yeah, and that has something to do with other points that other faculty already mentioned. And then to stay motivated, that's very, very important. So try to be connected with other graduate students. Maybe form a little graduate club where you talk about it. And then join the SRS presentations, because if you give a successful presentation about your topic, you get a good feedback from the audience, you get motivated, and then you can ride on that wave and finish the last couple weeks to finish your data set and then write it up. And beside of SRS, there are lots of local opportunities to present your work. They often have funds for students. So it's not that difficult to actually find opportunities to present your work. And believe me, for my students, that was always very motivating. Lots of work at the beginning, and many said, oh, I don't really have the time. I don't want to do it. Do I have to do that, Dr. Lauer? And then I said, no, you don't, but you should. And the ones that did it, then they said, oh, wow, this was so good to keep me going. It would be really good if you are a good teammate, because often in the laboratory, you have to work together with other students. And in my lab, we often team a graduate student up with undergraduate students. So you become a mentor yourself. And then if you're smart, you can maybe also use the undergraduate students as little helpers. Yeah. So it would be good if you have skills that makes you a good teammate. And that also prepares you for your job later on. Because in many jobs, you are not lonely working on some kind of project in a corner all by yourself. You work together with other people. So it's very good to develop skills like being helpful to others, then also people help you, and then you might even be able to finish early. Yeah. And think about what you put on your CV, what you can do during your master thesis. If you attended workshops, if you presented your work, if you were maybe teaching a class, if you were helping undergraduates with that project. This is all something great that you can put on your CV. Yeah. And you will mature with your work, you will become even more independent, you learn, yeah, and that's what we want. Yeah, but we also want you to finish. And the crown of your thesis when you do the research track would be a publication. Yeah. But there are also non-thesis master programs which are great, of course. Yeah. And you can consider both. But if you consider going on to a PhD, we would advise you consider a thesis, a written thesis, because that is your ticket in. You at least would get an invitation to an interview. But then, of course, you want to be proud of your thesis and not be embarrassed of that little blip that is sitting in somewhere in a library that is open to the public. You want to be proud of it, yeah, because people might check it out. At least other graduate students might check it out, and then they want to say, "Wow, this was great. I want to do something like this." Yeah. So maybe if you want to get an idea about theses look like, maybe start doing this. Some theses that other graduate students accomplished.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lauer. So I'll just interject here before we move to the next one. You might have noticed we're moving kind of chronologically through topics. So we started with topics on thinking about things before you apply, how to apply, and now we're moving into how to succeed when you're actually in the program. So along kind of continuing this trajectory, our next speaker is Professor Heidi He. Professor He is in the Department of Nursing, and she's going to be speaking about keeping your eye on the prize. Never give up. Professor He.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, I'm really surprised how many people are here. So again, I'm impressed. I should say surprised. I'm impressed. Obviously, this is a group of students very motivated and ambitious. So that being said, doesn't matter. Grad school is not supposed to be easy. If it's easy, we'll be handing degree at the curbside, right? So, and it's not supposed to be easy. And that's why you pressure it, you value it. The hard is, whatever it is, the harder you work for, the more you treasure it, right? So that being said you will have a time during the program that you'll be pulling your hair, you'll be stressed out, you'll be frustrated, you'll be asking, why am I doing this? And I don't know what I got myself into. I don't know why I'm doing it. Actually, that's a perfect question to ask at that time. So is a time that when you're stressed, frustrated, it's time to step back. Really, why are you here? Then actually tie back to what Dr. Pratt and earlier was saying. The reason you decided to go to graduate school, I'm hoping is because maybe you want to start a new career. Maybe you want to advance your career. Maybe like me, you want to be a nurse practitioner, have more autonomy and full practice authority, or you want to solve a problem and make a new discovery. But if you quit school then, do you think you're going to accomplish any of those goals? The answer probably is no. So that being said then you need to step back and say, okay, this is the goal. This is where I want to go. And how do I get there? So always remember, there's always the light at the end of the tunnel, even though you don't see it yet. So there'll be always light there. And then what do you do? One step at a time. Just like all the skills we already discussed, time management and a priority, and just one step at a time. Have a supportive, network, supportive relationship. Actually, that's very, very important. When we stress, when we have the self-doubt, you need a cheerleader. Say, yay, you can do it. And if you can find one, be a cheerleader for yourself. But I'm hoping before you decided to go to grad school, you already has the support system built up. And you need to have a sounding board, and you need to have someone say, yes, you can do that. And then another thing is stay away from negativity. I think negativity just weigh you down. And for me is have all the time complaining, might as well just sit down and get some work done, right? So stay away from negativity and stay away from the people who are negative, because they will weigh you down. So then another thought I want to share is that know your weakness and what's your strength. If you, like me, I'm addicted to K-drama and C-drama. If I started, I can't stop. And then I don't start. I'm just going to cut myself out if I have a project to do, if I'm in grad school. Maybe I work myself, after the semester break, maybe. But just know your weakness. I know my weakness, so I don't start, okay? And then next thing is, what I want to tell you is you need to have a, growth mindset. What that mean is, nobody's perfect. We're learning. And if you make a mistake and don't see that as a failure, see that as an opportunity to grow. And that's the process of learning. And that's why we're better. And I think that's make a big difference, because think about the result. The result is by the time you finish, you're going to have that well-deserved degree that you're very, very proud of. But that is not really the end result I'm going to talk about. The end result is all the skill set you build along the way. And so by the time you finish grad school, guess what? You'll have better time management skill, critical thinking and problem solving skill, financial management. Guess what? We all poor when we're in grad school. And you know how you stretch that last dollar, right? And then working collaboratively, and you're able to prioritize multiple competing priorities, right? And those are the skill. Actually, it's not a degree that will help you. I shouldn't say will help you, but those are the skills that you learn along the way that will help you in your professional degree and your life in general. So that's your prize. Keep your eyes on the prize.
Thank you very much, Professor He. So I'll be the last speaker. So my name is Dr. Anna Jacobsen. I'm also in the Department of Biology, and I'll be speaking briefly on responding to criticism, welcoming feedback, and using it to grow, improve, and succeed. And this is something that I've noticed for many of the students in our program and many of my students is where they hit a wall, and it doesn't have to be that way. And so if you know it ahead of time, you can respond to it really, really positively. So for many graduate students, graduate school is the first time that they experience academic criticism, which is getting back extensive edits, comments, notes from their advisor, from their committee member, maybe from a peer project. And so in graduate school, you're often working on big projects and big papers and writing a thesis and something that takes weeks or months. So you're writing these really big things and incorporating comments from a lot of different people. What often happens is, I know for my students, they get their first comments from me back, say on their proposal, and there's all these edits and red ink, and they think, oh my word, this means I shouldn't be here, or I don't have the skills to be here, or this is somehow a statement on my intelligence. And it's none of those things. It's working together to improve and to make things better. So I know it can be upsetting to hear that your work needs to be altered or you need to change things. If you're being critiqued maybe on professional practices, you have to alter an activity or a skill you've been doing. So to know that you're going to be getting that kind of feedback and to think ahead of time about how to respond to it can make it productive and rewarding and not something that becomes a barrier to you succeeding. And it's a really important part of becoming a professional or an academic. When I publish papers, I still get reviews back, and you always are going to take the moment where you scream and go, these people are idiots. I don't want to do any of this. And it's fine to take that moment, but then you need to move forward, and you need to recognize that even in a professional work environment, if you're working to put together a product, an ad campaign, a report, there's feedback that you're going to be getting from people you're working with, from your boss, and you need to be able to respond positively to it. So I have just a couple kind of short tips, knowing that that's part of the process ahead of time. When you get comments back, how do you respond? So number one, don't take it personally. If your advisor gives you a lot of edits, if you feel like they're being really critical, if they have a lot of changes that they're suggesting, it's not a comment on your academic aptitude, your intelligence, or your abilities. They are trying to help you, to give you suggestions to improve your work. Number two, if you get a lot of comments back, be grateful for your advisor's time, your committee members' time, other reviewers' time, even peer reviewers. I know graduate advisors are all really busy. So they're not going to give you a lot of comments because they don't think you're worthy. They're giving you a lot of comments because they think you are. They've spent a lot of time to try to help you. And so if you think about it in terms of, this is a gift that they took time out of a busy schedule to spend all of this time to provide these detailed comments to me, I should be really thankful for this because they're really investing in helping me. So that's actually, I know in the moment it won't feel that way, but it's actually them saying you're worth the investment of time. So it's a signal that you're very worthy. A third comment, I am constantly reminded of this. No one is perfect. We're not perfect as writers. We're not perfect as scientists. We're not perfect as practitioners, especially when we're first starting out. So you might get comments back on a paper and feel like all of these extensive edits mean that you're a terrible writer. But instead, it should be an opportunity to improve. And it's good to remember that practice makes closer to perfect. And so every edit is an opportunity to practice a little bit more. And we can all use a little bit more practice. And then number 4, Dr. Lauer mentioned that one of the goals, especially with the thesis, is to try to publish. It's important to remember that the edits that your advisor gives back to you will be nicer than the comments that external anonymous reviewers give to you. And so again, this is part of, some people call it developing intellectual calluses, but getting ready to have those comments come in, be able to say, okay, they wrote that this paragraph, they didn't like, it didn't make sense to them. Maybe I need to rework that paragraph. Maybe I need to remove it. But that it's, again, none of these comments are going to be indications of your competence. It's all part of the academic process of helping each other to improve. And that means that you have to sometimes erase things and you have to change things. But this is all part of criticism towards improvement. And then my last comment, and this goes along with what Professor He said, keep your eye on the prize and remember that everyone is here to help you succeed. Your advisor wants you to exceed. Your graduate committee wants you to succeed. So if your advisor is, I know for my students, we'll go through maybe 18 rounds of edits on their thesis. And so it can feel overwhelming. But all of that is trying to help something to be the best it can be, to help a writer improve, to help a student meet their goals. So again, remember, what feels like negativity or criticism in a moment is a team of people trying to give you advice, to give you edits, to help you to succeed. And if you go in knowing that's going to happen and that you're going to have to evolve and change to meet those requests, it will be a much more positive experience than it would otherwise be. And again, remember that none of it is trying to be a criticism of you. No one is trying to say, I'm giving you these edits, so you shouldn't be here. You should be here. You're in a program. We want you to be here. Let us and your advisor team, your committee team, help you to come up with the best possible products. So kind of my rah-rah. So I'm just going to interject off topic here. So we've reached the 9 o'clock hour, which means the 1 hour panel discussion formal time is over.